Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, a fishery which has a sign banning Polish and Eastern Bloc anglers is facing possible legal action. The owner of Field Farm Fisheries in Oxfordshire says he'd previously caught anglers stealing fish and is standing up for what he believes in. Billy Evans, who's a former Conservative councillor, has had similar signs on his property since 2009. I've been talking to Polish fisherman Rado Papieski, who is crowdfunding to pay for a private prosecution and have the sign removed. Elizabeth Prochaska, who's the legal director of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who say they'll take enforcement action, and Martha Spurrier, the director of Liberty. I asked Rado what he thought when he first saw the sign.
When I first seen it, I felt a bit disappointed, and I felt this is quite unfair for all the Eastern European and Polish anglers who are actually fishing in the UK quite legally. You know, because despite the 7 years of very good work we've put in order to educate migrant anglers and educate fishery owners about different rules, regulations, traditions, you come across a place where the fishery owner decides to take a case in his own hands and decides to do things like this, which are not necessarily legal.
And when you say rules, regulations and traditions, you mean because some Polish fishermen fish to take the food to eat? Is that what you mean? Yes,
it is. And it's a tradition to fish for food in whole Europe. England is a place where you fish for sport. So
you're expected to throw the fish back?
Exactly. You catch, you take a photograph of it, and you put it back. And if you can imagine someone who's been fishing back in Poland for 20-odd years with a mindset of going, catching a fish and cooking it, because this is how we've been growing up. And coming to a different country and being told that, you know, you have to catch a fish and release it, it takes a bit of a time to, you know, to change the mindset. You know, it's not a one-day sort of thing.
Billy Evans, who is the owner of this fisheries, has put a similar sign up in the past, actually, in 2009. Obviously, we tried to get him onto the programme. That wasn't possible. But he said previously he has caught some anglers stealing fish. He says, I shall stand up for what I believe in. If they want to call me a racist for stopping thieves from coming onto my private property, that's what they'll do. I'm right and I'm doing the right thing.
And, you see, I have never denied that there was no problems on the fishery. I'm sure there are problems in different regions of the country, and I'm sure people will steal a fish, will take a chance. But there are different ways to deal with a matter, you know, not banning a whole community or a whole country anglers from a fishery. And this is where our organisation come across. We can provide the guidance and we can actually tell them what to do. But when I offer some help to the fishery owner, he rejected it. He said he doesn't want to hear about it. Sign is there to stay. And this is pure ignorance in my eyes.
Right. And you have come across a similar sign at another private fishery, and you did have a conversation with the owner and eventually persuaded him to remove the sign.
Exactly, exactly. A very similar matter. You know, everyone can make a mistake and do something wrong. But then when you offer help and advice, and when the sign's been taken, that's it. I see my job's been done. And the guy who actually taken the sign down is quite a strong supporter of integration and education processes now. So it works.
And do you always put the fish back?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what is the specific legal problem that this sign presents?
This is a really straightforward case of direct discrimination on the grounds of nationality under the Equality Act 2010. There's no question that it's unlawful. It doesn't matter what Mr Evans' motive is for putting up the sign. He could easily deal with this by putting up a sign that said, please don't take the fish. He doesn't need to discriminate on the grounds of nationality.
What will you be doing about it?
We, in the first instance, will be writing to Mr Evans, and we will follow up with legal action if he doesn't remove the sign as a result.
Because this is not a criminal matter, it's a civil matter, I understand.
That's right.
So what sort of action would you be able to pursue?
You pursue the matter in the county courts under the Equality Act 2010, and you would seek either an injunction or an order after the end of the hearing, which would force Mr Evans to remove the sign.
How unusual is a case like this?
It's fairly unusual, but unfortunately earlier this year we did have to bring a very similar sort of case against Mr Wilson, a landlord who had discriminatory letting criteria, and we were successful in seeking an injunction against him to stop him from using discriminatory letting criteria. So it is unusual, but I wonder whether the current political climate is enabling more of this sort of attitude to proliferate.
OK, well, let me ask you, Martha, as director of the campaigning organisation Liberty, about what Elizabeth calls the current political climate. Are you registering a rise in discrimination examples like the one we're discussing today?
Yes, I think we are. I mean, after the referendum last year, there was a big rise in hate crime, and we know that many of those hate crimes are targeted at people who are from Eastern Europe or are perceived to be from Eastern Europe, but may have a right to be here. And that can be anything from this kind of sign or those kinds of letting arrangements, or it could be verbal abuse in the street. But we've also seen some violent hate crimes. So there was a Polish community organisation in London that was smashed up shortly after the referendum.
And what is the link with the referendum vote?
Well, I think, firstly, it's nothing to do with whether you voted Leave or Remain. It's not about saying one group of people are racist or bigoted. It's nothing so black and white. But I think that there, in some quarters of that debate at that time, and then in politics since, there has been a sense that it is OK to demonise and scapegoat people from other countries.
Where has that sense come from?
Well, I think, for example, about 10 days ago, we saw a story where a Polish couple had been very violently burgled, and the woman had been beaten up in her own home, and they went to the police to report this crime, and the police, rather than treating them as vulnerable victims, like you would hope to be treated if that had happened in your own home, they arrested the man and they turned him over to the Home Office, and he was then detained in an immigration removal centre, and he's lawfully here. That sends a signal of saying that it's immigration enforcement at any human cost, and we prioritise that over everything. And I think that that then might give licence to some people, like the man who put up this sign, to act on their worst prejudices.
What's the best way to combat that kind of prejudice?
Well, I think, firstly, you want to see some leadership from the top, so I think you have to have an absolute kind of zero-tolerance policy across the board. And that means everyone, and public officials in particular, when they legislate, when they make policies, and any rhetoric that they use, has to be all about non-discrimination and equality and treating people fairly and with respect. And then we need to take action. You know, people might think this is a kind of small example, but actually you have to take action and be vigilant against every single example of this kind of really abhorrent, very unfair and very upsetting behaviour.
You run a project, Rado, called Building Bridges, which, as you mentioned earlier, was about educating and integrating anglers from other countries. What do you say to anglers from other countries about returning the fish to the water?
You see, this is for me, this is a fantastic concept, and you only realise this when you catch a fish, return it back, and then you catch it again, and the fish is bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you photograph yourself, and that gives you a lot of satisfaction when you see the same fish growing, and you know you can sort of beat your own personal records. And you know what we try to sell, what the message which we're trying to sell to migrant anglers is that this is going to help us to keep up the fish availability, and we can go fish and enjoy a sport. You know, when our next generation can. When we remove a fish from the water, obviously there's going to be nothing to fish for in the future. So this is some of the arguments we use to sort of, to persuade migrant anglers to do it.
And if Billy Evans is annoyed at people stealing his fish, how should he handle it, in your view?
Well, there are different means. Obviously, there's the police, there is voluntary bailiff scheme, which is run by Angling Trust. And there is Environment Agency, which is doing a fantastic job. They are under-resourced now, but they're doing a fantastic job. So there are organisations which are actually looking after the fisheries. And if there are problems with someone removing a fish from the fishery, it's the same problem like people stealing the shop. So it should be reported to the police.
OK. You're going back to Poland?
I am. Right? Yes, I am. I'm sort of one leg here, one leg already in Poland. Just decided to change my life, same as I did 15 years ago, and decided to move to England. Now I decided that it's time to change and sort of try a life back in my own country.
Good luck. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks for coming on the programme, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rado Papieski, who's crowdfunding to pay for a private prosecution against that sign which bans Polish and Eastern Bloc anglers from fishing at a farm in Oxfordshire. Also, Elizabeth Prochaska from the Equality and Human Rights Commission and Martha Spurrier from Liberty.